the biggest frustration I see in people is that they are really skilled. But what separates the truly successful people from the people who just kind of chug along in their career are the people who can shamelessly talk about their wins. If you are holding back and not sharing that explicitly with the world, whether it's an interviewer or your manager, you are really, truly limiting your full potential. And that's heartbreaking to me.
Welcome to the show, Jenny. Great to have you.
Hey, great to be here, Johnny, AJ.
I had the pleasure of actually meeting you in person in Atlanta last year, and I got to see a lot of these qualities in action. So it's exciting now to dig into the book and hear your story behind the book, as well as share these qualities with our audience.
Yeah, let's dig.
So there's a quote that I'd love to start a discussion with, an insight you share in the book that I know rings true for Johnny and I, and we've seen firsthand in all the amazing guests we've had on the show. The quote is, "Successful people take action despite their fear. They muster the courage to do what's necessary to succeed before it's encouraged by others or even considered socially acceptable."
Yeah.
Why is that so important for us?
It's important because I observed growing from entry level to executive at Google over 18 years that a key blocker to so many people's success, mind you, these are skilled, talented, capable, experienced people at Google. So a blocker to so much of their success was their relationship to fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of the judgment of others. And that last one is particularly interesting and acute. And it shapes how we view ourselves. It shapes how we see ourselves. It shapes how others maybe see us. It creates a voice in our head that creates these labels we want to avoid, right? Like, oh, I might do that. I might go for that job or ask to participate in that team, but I'm worried that or I might disagree with my boss or my VP, but I don't do it because I'm worried someone might call me blank, right? Fill in the blank with any negative label that might come your way, right? That we want to avoid. And those are the 9 labels that I like to reclaim, because these labels create the bars of an invisible cage that keep us small, keep us quiet, keep us following versus leading.
And for the skeptics in our audience, as we go through these traits, I think it's really important to highlight that not only did you learn about them in your own career path, but you also developed training at Google to help others break through. So yeah. I know in listening to some of these traits, they might sound off-putting at first, or, hey, that works for you, Jenny, but that won't work for me. But really what your training that you put together and built at Google did was allowed others to grow in their career. So yeah. I'd love to really unpack what that program was like and how you developed it, and then we can get into the great traits.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the book is very different from the training at Google, namely because once we get into the traits, you'll recognize how it never would have flown to have a program at Google that doubled down on these traits. But the program was called Own Your Career, and it really just started as a lark. I ran an operations team that sat between sales and engineering that helped drive billions in revenue annually. And I've never been in HR. I've never been in people operations. I've always enjoyed coaching and mentoring. And just out of my own journey, trying to go from an executive role in the New York office to an executive role in the Boulder office, I found myself getting stuck and coming up against a wall and really spending 6 months trying hard to find this next leadership role for me at Google. So I wrote down these 12 tips or so to myself to help me be successful next time. Just as notes, honestly, like a black and white document with 12 bullets, 1 page. And then when people would come to me for mentorship, I'd say, hey, why don't you read this doc first? And then we can chat about your specific, challenges, but this will get us ahead of the game. Well, that doc started getting shared. It started getting shared more. And then it became a 60-minute training. Then it became a biweekly newsletter. And then I named it Own Your Career. And before I knew it, these career tips, these tips to help with stakeholder management or networking or negotiations, the program grew to tens of thousands of people across nearly 100 countries, and it became one of Google's largest career programs in its 25-year history. Absolutely shocking to me, but what it told me was, like, I've struck a nerve. People want help with this, and especially like in the age of AI, the soft skills matter so much, and people are always craving help with the soft skills. So that's a little bit about the program.
I know for many of our audience members and even our clients, they lean so heavily on the technical skills to get ahead in their career, and then they hit that invisible wall where these people skills become invaluable. And they try to focus on the immediate relationships around them, so with their boss or their peers. But a lot of what's missing is showcasing these traits with people outside of just your small group to get that visibility, to move from invisible to visible in the organization. For you personally in your career, how did you unlock that visibility piece?
First, we have to acknowledge that visibility is a good thing and it is critical. And if anybody tells you, just keep your head down and get your work done, they are lying to you. They're lying to you. And I want to not lie to you anymore. I want you to recognize that visibility is critical. And okay, managing up, old news. That's to your boss. We want to manage higher. We want to manage diagonally. So manage higher is have a twice a year meeting with your boss's boss, especially at a mid to large size organization. Get to know 2 or 3 of your manager's peers. If your manager has 7 peers, get to know 2 or 3 of them in an organic, authentic way. Not, hey, I'm up for promotion and I just wanted to introduce myself. My name's Jenny Wood, right? 24 hours before promotions are decided. Not like that, in a way that is bringing a project to them that you're working on and you're excited about and you might be able to offer to their team in the future or get feedback on because someone on their team has done something similar. Or asking one of them to mentor you because you're genuinely interested in their projects, in their team and their work. And you think that they might be able to give you guidance, career guidance, project guidance, relationship guidance. So managing higher is meeting your boss's boss and having a relationship with them. Managing diagonally is, if you think of your manager as up above you on the org chart and their peers are next to them, managing diagonally is building relationships with a couple key players of your manager's peers. And the reason I say key players is, let's keep it real. I'm not a BSer. Not every single one of your manager's 7 peers have equal influence, equal weight, and equally bend the big boss's ear. So find the intersectionality between who has the influence, who do people take seriously, because some people just got that position because they got lucky, right? And who do you really genuinely connect with, and who can offer you feedback and ideation and expanded ways that you can think about your work. That's the holy grail. But to me, that is like visibility at its core, is going beyond your manager.
And for those who are listening on the other side of this, I want you all to realize that of what time it is. And we had a little laugh earlier before the call of just talking about how even your colleagues are going to be using AI. So the skill gap that you think you might have the advantage of, that's closing fast. And so it is going to be your people skills that is going to do most of the heavy lifting, getting you to or towards your goals. And so if you do have those beliefs of, I'm just going to keep my head down and work hard and I'm going to be seen for the work that I do, or I'm going to outwork everyone else around me, you are making this incredibly difficult on yourself.
Yeah. And less fun, by the way, because it's fun to build relationships and you derive excitement and energy and enthusiasm and ideas from these colleagues that you can extend yourself to getting to know better. It's funny that you bring up the mindset shift, Johnny. I was actually just coaching somebody last week and he was applying for a role. And I said, everyone's used to sending a thank you note within 24 hours after the interview. I was like, send a pre-note. Every touch point matters before an interview. Send a pre-note with 3 bullets, highlight your superpowers, add a couple links to projects you've done. And this was like blowing his mind. And I was like, and use numbers, double your numbers. Every bullet should have good ROI, not traditional ROI, but this is, what is your role? What was your objective? And what was your impact, right? Use numbers. He was like in the top 1% of production on his current team. And he was going to this product management role that was so perfectly aligned with what he'd been doing. And he was so nervous, so scared to share these bullets ahead of time. I'm like, you want to bias? Bias is a loaded word, but like, let's use it in a positive way. When you walk into that interview, you want to bias before you even get there, that interviewer, that you're a rock star. So why not give them some data ahead of time? And your resume doesn't cut it. That is too long. There's too much going on there. It's way too overwhelming. Pick 3 bullets, send a pre-interview note 24 hours before you walk in the door. And here's where the mindset shift comes in, Johnny. He pushed back on me and he's like, Jenny, there's no way I can do that. Isn't that going to come across as like obnoxious or a little bit arrogant or a little bit pushy? And I was like, you've got to be bold because this is a competitive place. And if you've got 50 other resumes that this hiring manager is looking at, and they're going to have at least 5 or 7 other interviews. You want to be bold. You want to stand out. You want to share these incredible numbers. And if there's ever a time to be bold and bullish, it's in an interview. Like, your resume is a brag document. You're just tightening up that brag document and giving them like a little mini brag. And it was really interesting to see how much he struggled with this mindset shift and this leaning into boldness. And I talk about wild courage and the importance of that and how it helps you get ahead to go after what you want and get it. But it was really hard for him to have the wild courage to even just send that email.
Let's just go through what that would look like if AJ and I were to get that email before the interview.
Sure. I'm so curious.
AJ's going to get that email, and he's going to send that email over to me and go, look at what this guy right here. And we're both going to get fired. I'm like, okay, well, you got the floor, sir. You got our attention. Let's hear it. What do you got? So it would definitely pique our curiosity and get us fired up. Now, you better show up and deliver after that. But if you're touting that you're a rock star, then show up as the rock star.
The biggest frustration I see in people is that they are really skilled. They are really talented. They are rock stars in their own way. Like, of course, you've got to have the goods, right? But what separates the truly successful people from the people who just kind of like go along to get along and like kind of chug along in their career are the people who can shamelessly talk about their wins, right? And I say shamelessly in a really positive way, because I love to kick imposter syndrome to the curb and inspire people to have less shame in and take so much pride in their accomplishments and their talents and their skills and their strengths. So assuming you've got the goods to back it up, which I think a lot of people do, whatever those skills and talents are, if you are holding back and not sharing that explicitly with the world, whether it's an interviewer or your manager, your manager's peers, or your manager's boss, or even your peers, you are really, truly limiting your full potential. And that's heartbreaking to me. It's frustrating to me. And that's why I like to help people do it.
Yeah. And you're also shining attention in the spotlight to the areas that you want the interviewer to see.
Oh,
right. So so now they can see where you're good, and rather than just listening to you and trying to figure it out for themselves, help them out.
Absolutely. You're signposting for them. You're even almost helping them figure out what to focus on in the interview. Heck, that saves people time. People are busy. People are distracted. People are overwhelmed. And by the way, all of this extends to your one-on-one weekly Tuesday meeting for 30 minutes with your boss, right? Come with a prepared agenda. Come with 4 different categories: wins from last week, current challenges, number 2, number 3, where I need your support, number 4, career. Those are 4 awesome categories to bring to every meeting with your boss. Put bullets in there, share some wins with numbers, right? Focus your boss on what you want to talk about in that meeting. The people who reported to me, the managers who reported to me who were most successful, spent 30 minutes prepping their one-on-one doc before we had our weekly meeting. And I would love going in there and seeing the links they had linked to with their project and the specific questions. I love the ones that started with what and how, because those are always so much more powerful. There's specific questions of what they needed from me. The ones who were advocating for their careers with that particular section in the one-on-one, not that you cover it every week, but occasionally there would be some bullets in there. The ones who didn't do so well in their careers and who were always kind of just plugging along were the ones who just showed up to the meeting with me. They weren't focusing me. They weren't focusing themselves. They weren't focusing the conversation. And that is a gift to your leader. It is nothing but a gift.
You have the power to set the agenda.
Yeah.
You don't realize it. And this is what's interesting to us with our clients is like invisibility starts small. It's like that sense of relief when the boss cancels the one-on-one stand-up meeting because they're too busy. And then it snowballs. Okay, well, good. I got out of that meeting and now I didn't have to prepare. And then a couple weeks go by, you haven't talked to your boss at all. And then now you're showing up remote. And then in the group meeting, you haven't really had any results. So you don't raise your hand. You don't want to talk. And then months and months go by. And guess what happens around promotion? It's not just your boss vying for you to get promoted. It's his peers or her peers saying, I've never heard that name before. I don't know that I can put my power behind them getting promoted. And that invisibility then robs you of promotion, but it also robs you of relationships. And this is what I wanted to key in on, because so many of these traits we're taught and told make you less charismatic, less charming, less interesting, when in actuality, to build great relationships fast, you have to stand out. You cannot be average. You cannot be shy, timid, and hope that other people see this in you. You have to stand out to build relationships quickly. So I'd love to dig into, at least first, are any of these traits that you break down in the book something that you specifically had to harness or hard for you in the beginning, or how did you unlock them as a part of this Wild Courage project?
As we dig into these traits more, let me name them. So we have 9 traits in the book. And as I mentioned, these traits create the bars of an invisible cage that keeps you small. And because I want people to stop playing small and start playing smart, and I know that every single one of you listening has the capacity to do that, the 9 traits are weird, selfish, shameless, nosy, obsessed, manipulative. That's a spicy one. Brutal, reckless, and bossy. And you're right, AJ, like these are eyebrow raising traits. These are sizzly. These are spicy, right? But I'm reclaiming these words. I'm inviting all of you rather to reclaim these words and to use them for good in a sane and savvy way that helps you get seen, get heard, and get ahead. So for example, manipulative, old definition, intended to control. New reclaimed definition, the courage to build relationships through empathy and create lasting partnerships. Or reckless, like acting without caution. Reclaimed, the courage to take healthy risks and err on the side of action. Weird, win as you or lose as who. Selfish, the courage to stand behind your efforts and abilities. So this is all powerful language. And when you think about the new definitions that I'm offering to you today, it does seem like good stuff that everybody should be taking advantage of, but people get scared of the labels. They get scared to be called, oh, she's so bossy, right? Especially as a female leader. Well, to me, bossy is the courage to listen and lead. Or, she's so manipulative. My goodness, like what a scary one to be called. But I mean, what do good leaders do aside from getting other people to move a process or a program or an organization forward? Like, manipulation can be a positive thing. You take a lump of clay as an artist and you manipulate it into something creative and innovative, a beautiful sculpture, a beautiful wall hanging. Well, good leaders manipulate teams to be creative, processes to be innovative, just like the artists. So these things, and manipulation is really straight up relationship building and recognizing that why are we opening our mouths at any point ever if we're not trying to get someone to do something or say something? I mean, why do you have this podcast if not to say things, to have things come out of your mouth and my mouth that will hopefully help other people, right?
We have a great example in the book of manipulative around meeting someone that had a great impact on you and recognizing that this might be your one chance to do so and acting accordingly. But of course, if you label it as manipulative, I could see a lot of people in the audience being like, well, I could never do that. But it ended up being such a huge win for you. So share that anecdote for our audience.
I was riding the subway home from work in 2011, and about 20 feet away from me is this really attractive guy. Gorgeous blue eyes, perfectly coiffed 5 o'clock shadow. Can a 5 o'clock shadow be coiffed?
Maybe, yeah.
He had great facial hair, right? And I was like so taken by him, but I got stuck in fear. Right. I wanted to walk up to him and be like, hey, I'm Jenny. Right. But I was on a packed subway train. I had fear of the judgment of others. What if 100 people watch me while I make a fool of myself? Fear of failure. What if he's married? Fear of uncertainty. What if he's a convicted felon? Right. And so I made a deal with myself. I said, if he gets off at my stop, I will try to strike up a conversation with him. And if not, then say la vie. That's the universe telling me it wasn't meant to be. He gets off at the next stop. That is not my stop. And I have this moment of wild courage, this wave of boldness and shamelessness that like pushes me out of my subway seat, basically. And I ran off that train as I thought, forget the universe. I'm making my own meant to be. So I chase to catch up with him as he's exiting the station. And I say, excuse me, you're wearing gloves, so I can't tell if you're wearing a wedding ring, but in the event that you're not married, you were on my subway and I thought you were cute. Any chance I could give you my business card? And I wait for what feels like a slow forever for him to respond as I'm out of breath and my heart pounding. And finally, he takes the card A week later, we go on a date. It was amazing. 3 years later, we got married, and we've now been married 11 years with 2 little rugrats.
Again, if we were to label that as manipulative, we wouldn't have left the subway and let that opportunity pass you by.
Or shameless, right? We could label that shameless. We could label that bossy, right? Like traditionally, think about societal norms or traditional roles. Like, no, the woman should wait there and wait for the man to ask her out. Like, that is bossy and shameless and selfish for her to go after what she wants. Like, how unusual and uncommon and atypical is that? But you know what? If you're usual and you're common and you're typical at work or in your life or in your friendships or in your relationships, you're going to get forgotten. You're not going to get ahead, and you're not going to achieve the success that I know each one of you has in you to achieve, just waiting there, waiting for it to come out.
Yeah, I know in thinking about these traits, there's always the negative impact of being labeled it by others at some point in your past. So, each one of those traits, there's probably one example in your past as you're listening to the show where you're like, I've been called that. I hated it. I don't want to be judged by that. And now that label has persisted so much that you've dimmed that entirely. You've ran from it, avoided it, and it's cost you all these opportunities. So what can we do when that negative voice comes in and it's like, oh, Jenny, you're just going to be manipulative. You can't leave this subway car.
I think the first thing you do is you start small. Like, let's say, depending on your background or your culture, whether you're listening in from a more bold culture or bold city like New York or LA or, whatever you characterize, or you were born in Japan or Beijing or Sao Paulo, right? All of these things can affect how we feel about this level of boldness. So no matter where you are coming from today, no matter what it is that you want to go after and get, there's always something small you can do, or whether you're introverted or extroverted. So you start small. You start maybe by sending a weekly Monday email to your manager saying, hey, these are 3 things I accomplished last week, and these are 3 things I'm really looking forward to this week, right? It doesn't involve chasing anybody off the subway. It doesn't involve standing up in front of your company and presenting to 300 people. Maybe it's as simple as when your VP finishes their presentation in the town hall, you send them a quick ping, a quick Slack, and you say, hey, that was really helpful, and I appreciate your transparency walking us through this reorg, right? Think about it. Your leader has imposter syndrome too. They're insecure when they're delivering this really tricky, complicated reorg to the company. They're worried about how it's going to land. Am I communicating this thoughtfully? Are we doing right by all of you? And so even just giving your leader the encouragement, like, hey, that actually landed pretty well. I thought you did a good job delivering it. I know this is tough news, and it was really helpful how you unpacked it. That is such incredible relationship building and doesn't require some huge sweeping move like chasing your future husband off the subway.
Now, in the book, you start with weird as the first trait. Is there a reason that we lead with weird? Because I know so many of our audience members, and we laugh about this with Johnny too, and in the boot camp when they come to train with us, that's like the one that they avoid the most. I don't want to be seen as weird.
If you go along to get along and you wear if you're the intern and you wear the requisite dress code and you sit there quietly in the meeting and you format your resume exactly to the specifications, okay, that's cool. And you can put that company on your resume for the 3-month stint that summer. But if you want to land that highly competitive role long-term, you got to stand out. Maybe as that intern, you're weird in that you disagree thoughtfully with something that's being said in the meeting. Heck, you might even get 3 reprimands and 3 compliments in the same day, right? Because when you're putting yourself out there and being weird and authentic, you take a risk and you might ruffle some feathers and smooth some other feathers. And that's just part of life, right? But weird is the foundation of the book because it's all about authenticity. And sometimes it's just simple authenticity. There was this one candidate, Carly, who was applying for a role on my team. And man, did she stand out because of one single line on her resume. At the very bottom, under interests, it said, in constant pursuit of the perfect oatmeal raisin cookie recipe. She didn't just say foodie. She didn't say, restaurant connoisseur or whatever. She gave this very weird, specific anecdote that showed so much personality. That was a bit of a risk because it's an unusual thing to write on a resume. that showed her curiosity. It showed her nosiness. It showed her shamelessness, right? That she would do something that was unusual and which was also weird. It showed her obsession, right? Obsessed is push, persist, perform, that she was looking for the best, not average, but the best oatmeal raisin cookie recipe. So all those traits, like she showed 5 traits in one sentence, starting with weird by doing something different. And it's one of the reasons I interviewed her. And then her colorful personality in the interview matched that resume. And that we were off to the races. She was one of the best hires I ever made at Google.
It's so fascinating how oftentimes just showcasing that weird side not only strikes authenticity, but really resonates with everyone because we all feel weird in different ways. We all have those passions that we know most people don't enjoy. Johnny has some musical obsessions that we've shared on the show over the years that I think a lot of our audience would label weird. I get way into cooking in very weird ways that I think aren't really going to resonate with most of our audience. We didn't start a podcast around those weird things, but they're a part of all of us.
Yeah.
And when you feel comfortable and confident enough to showcase that weirdness, you'd be surprised how much it resonates with others and creates the opportunity for a relationship.
It creates the opportunity for relationships, and it creates the opportunity for just partnership, because people like to work with interesting people. People like to see you as a person and not just this worker bee. And it's just such a powerful, that like your weirdness / authenticity combined with your enthusiasm. Enthusiasm can cover up so much lack of skill, talent, experience, because enthusiasm is just, it brings so much to the table. And I mean, I've hired people just based on their enthusiasm, like damn straight.
Yeah, being around people that bring great energy fuels the whole team. So why wouldn't you want to fill a team full of enthusiastic people?
And that's critical for a manager. Critical. Like if I had to pick between, a leader who I was hiring who was like killer at VLOOKUPs and knew all the shortcuts on their spreadsheet and could, run circles around me on the API or whatever spreadsheet or dashboard it was that we were building. Okay, that's fine. That's good. But if I'm not looking forward to walking into a one-on-one with that person each Thursday morning, I don't want to hire that person. I would much rather take 80% skill set on the spreadsheets, on the VLOOKUPs, on the shortcuts, on the API creation, and have that person be someone who is thoughtful, engaging, fun, creative, connected, and enthusiastic all day long.
So you highlight that some of these traits can be overdone. So let's talk about what are trait traps, because each trait you highlight, there are traps around them. And let's start with weird, because I think for those in our audience who are like, great, now I can be weird. Let me let my freak flag fly. They might overdo it.
How much do you want me to get into specifics on this one? On my own freak flag, you guide me here.
Yeah, we're explicitly rated here, so you can get as freaky as you want.
Okay. Not so. It happened in 7th grade. It's not so freaky. It's just deeply, deeply embarrassing. So
Okay.
weird is showing your best self. It is not saying something outlandish or obnoxious for the sake of attention. And on my first day of 7th grade, I was in a brand new school, and this middle school went 6th, 7th, and 8th. So, but I happened to do elementary school, 6th grade in elementary school. So I was the new girl, and everybody else knew each other. So my deep insecurity, my lowercase a anxiety, and my desire to be noticed, to be liked, to make people aware of who I was as this new girl, showed up in all the wrong ways. So we were in language arts class, and the teacher, Mrs. Howard, said, she gave her spiel at the beginning, that she said, okay, does anybody have any questions? It was like an introduction about who she was. And I raised my hand, desperate for a laugh. And I said, I have a question. Are you a virgin? In front of my entire 7th grade class, brand new 7th grade class. And that is the wrong kind of weird. That was letting my freak flag fly in really, really devastating ways. I did not get the laugh I was seeking. I did not make any friends that day. And then weirdly, I happened to see her in the greeting card aisle at the supermarket that afternoon, which is just a total coincidence. And I walked up to her, took the longest, 10 steps of my 11-year-old life. And I said, Mrs. Howard, I'm sorry. I apologize. I don't know where that came from. I don't know why I did that. And she was very gracious. And she said, that's okay. I understand. And she was a lovely teacher. But like, that's not the weird you want to be. You want to be professional, at work, or in your relationships and your friendships, on a date, whatever it is, you want to be mindful. You want to let your best self show, not just be weird for the sake of weird and say something, for attention or, we've all seen the movie stars who do the odd thing for attention. I guess sometimes it works, but if you're not a movie star, err on the side of the right, dial your weird up appropriately.
Well, I know as a people pleaser myself, and many of our audience members have shared with us that they've struggled in that category as well. How often do we find ourselves elevating others at the cost of ourselves, and that self-championing and being so self-assured, whether it's sending that email with, here are 3 great things about me, or leaning into all of the self-promotion that a lot of these traits allow in us, can be very difficult, especially when we're so clear on others and want to please those around us. So to the people pleasers in the audience, what advice do you have around highlighting these traits and showcasing these traits?
This one's tough for me. I think you alluded earlier to what do you still struggle with? This is one I definitely still struggle with. And, people think selfishness is the big problem in this world. I argue differently. I think selflessness in a professional setting can be an equally big problem, because sure, there are a couple of bad apples who spoil a bunch, right? And there are some people who truly are selfish. But when we're overly selfless in our careers, always giving that key project to somebody else, or, there's this person at this company who was a pretty large company, and she was like a top performer, really good manager, but she got distracted by the side project, and she got this performance review that was mediocre. And she had this working with a peer on a project, and she knew that even though they were doing equal work on the project, the peer would get extra kind of credit, like the peer would be seen as getting the lion's share of the credit if she was the one that presented the project in this 30-minute meeting to the leadership team. And so even though she wanted to encourage this peer, she's like, you know what? Can I actually do the presentation? She got a little bit selfish, just like this tiny little anecdote of selfishness, because she was starting to get concerned about her performance, right? She had gotten distracted by the side project. Her manager said, hey, get your eye back on the ball. And so she advocated for being the one to present, because she knew the person who presented would get the lion's share of the credit. So it's just like this small moment of selfishness that doesn't hurt anybody else. Her peer could present on a future project. It felt critical for this person to ask for this, but we oftentimes feel bad. We feel like, oh, we're letting our team down, or, well, why should I ask for what I want? Or why should I ask to present? Or, it's like, if you give everybody else a leg up at your expense, you really truly will get trampled career-wise, right? And those people will shine and go ahead and move ahead.
You have a great framework in the book, Win, that I think is super impactful in these moments.
I'll give one example, one story, and then one example from my own life. So the story is Claire Torrey was a session singer that was invited to just do this little tiny moment on this Pink Floyd song. Okay. So as she's recording this for Dark Side of the Moon, not even knowing what it would become, she just does her vocals. They become these legendary vocals, like, oh, right? These like legendary vocals on the song. And she's just making it up on the spot. She gets paid £30 as a fee just to be like a backup singer or a session singer. And then she walks out and she like goes along her day. So she doesn't even know that the song has made the album until she sees it come out. And then this goes on to be like 14 times platinum, massive, huge hit, Dark Side of the Moon. And so she says, okay, well, what I need now, like selfless would be like, oh my gosh, I was happy to get my £30 fee. But she got a little bit, she had some healthy selfishness, and she said, let's play to win. What I need now is a songwriting credit and XYZ lump of money, right? So she sues Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd was smart to settle outside of court for an undisclosed sum. And she was smart to be selfish in the right way and ask for what she needed. Cause like, it really wasn't an unfair situation, given she had made that song at what it was. Those legendary vocals are the key to that song. So that was her, what I need now. What I need now for me, I was really excited to do this volunteer role, to be head of the like quite large Google Boulder office. And this had been a dream of mine for years. I wanted to be co-head. I ran into the person who was head at a street fair, and where our kids were bouncing on this bouncy castle. Boulder's, not a huge city, and despite it having a large Google office, and I was like, I aspire to be co-site lead with you, and it was like on a Sunday, and our kids are bouncing, and everyone's got like snow cones dripping, like not at all the appropriate time to be asking, but I was asking for what I wanted. I was being a little bit shameless. Well, fast forward a couple of years, I'm actually offered the opportunity. And by that time, I had my full-time operations role. I was writing the book. I was leading the Own Your Career program. That was a massive undertaking. I was working every single night, every single Saturday and Sunday. And despite the fact that for years, I aspired to have that role to help lead the community, I said, all right, well, I got to play to win. What I need now is to say no, to not people please, to not look at Jenny's goals 3 years ago, but to look at Jenny's goals today. And they do not include this very, very heavy and time consuming role of being the volunteer co-head of the Google Boulder office. And as hard as it was for me to say no, I did, because that was not what I needed now for them. And she was incredible about it. She's like, hey, it is not your responsibility to worry about who's going to do it. I did feel like I do a good job, and I cared so much about the office and so much about the community. But she's like, that is my responsibility to find a next best option. It is not your responsibility. But I was like, going to say yes to people please and be like, but who else would do a good job? Right? That's just almost arrogant that there's nobody else who would do a good job. Of course there is. And she did say to me, Jenny, a man would not feel this way. So not to get too gendered, but she's like, a man would not be apologizing for saying no to this opportunity. So think about that too.
That key piece of what I need now, I think it's lost on so many of us, because especially in our career path, we're following what a lot of outside influence tells us will make us successful. So it's like, well, what my parents need to see, and what I need to tell my peers, and what I need to show on LinkedIn, and how I need to be getting approval from those around me. It's really hard to zone in and be clear enough for you to turn down such a major opportunity. What I need right now is actually not this, even though that opportunity would have influenced all those people. You could have put on your LinkedIn. Everyone would have looked up to you for that accomplishment. How do you really tap into that? Okay, this is what I need, and that self-awareness.
Very, very hard for me. I remember hiking with my dear friend, Nina, and she was like, Jenny, this gives you nothing. Like, not that it gives you nothing. She's like, it's so much work. And I think it's maybe a little bit of ego, because you like being seen as like the head of something. And Jenny, you love superlatives. And she's like, but just keeping it real with you, you focusing your energy on making this book as good as it can be. Like, if you had 3 hours next week, and because sometimes this role is dealing with like some real, unsexy kind of issues, right? Like, Google has a dog. Well, the dogs are allowed in the office. And then like every once in a while, someone's like, I'm allergic to dogs. Like, can we switch the dog allowed floors to floors 2 and floors 4? So you're like dealing with things like that. And then of course, leading all the company town halls and things like that that are quite fun and energizing. But she's like, if you had 3 hours of your time, are you better off dealing with what floors allow dogs and what floors don't allow dogs in the Google Boulder office? Or are you better off perfecting chapter 7 or improving chapter 7 to be helpful to not just the, thousands of people in this office, but to the millions of people you could potentially help motivate, invigorate and inspire with this book. And I was like, okay, you have a good point, Nina. But it was still so hard for me to say no. So hard. I wrote an entire document of like all the restrictions I'd have if I did take the role. And they were so thoughtful about working with me. But I was like, you know what? Even though they're saying like, oh, you've got all these other resources and all these other admins you can lean on to help, I knew at the end of the day, it was going to be a ton of work, and I just had to be brutal. That's one of my 9 traits. I had to be brutal, right?
Yeah, we talk a lot about boundaries on the show, and going along with that, like self-awareness of what you actually need, getting through the people-pleasing. Boundaries can feel very brutal when you draw them for the first time, and when you're actually stepping into the no, to say no to this major opportunity, to actually say yes to what you need in the moment.
Mm-hmm. And, Dory Clark has this great saying in her book, The Long Game, like every yes leads to 10 other yeses, or maybe she says 20 other yeses. And it is so true. Like now when I do a keynote, like sometimes people will say, okay, well, will you do this keynote at a discounted rate? Or, can you just do this little session with my cohort? And like, I want to say yes. And I'm like, oh, it'll just be 30 minutes of my time. They're like, oh, you just show up, literally don't have to prepare anything. Just this 30 minutes. That's it. Well, guess what? Then they send the questions in advance. And it's like, well, gosh, I want to put thought into this. I want this to be good. Then we have to change the date. So now I'm like in my calendar, right? So that's yes, number one. I'm like prepping questions in advance because I like to be helpful to people if I can. Number two, we're changing the dates. So I'm going back and forth in my calendar. Then I have a kid's dentist appointment that I have to like reschedule. So that's yes, number three. Like all these, one single yes can lead to 10, 20 additional yeses. Then someone follows up after the call and says like, hey, can you take a quick look at my resume, whatever it is. So I love that frame also that, every yes can lead to many more yeses. Or if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
And being brutal is also delivering feedback. And that can be challenging for young leaders. Being honest in a way that actually helps someone else grow can feel brutal in the delivery, can feel brutal in receiving, but ultimately can be that turning point in your career to really change your trajectory.
AJ, brutal can be kind. And I will tell you about a moment where I was sitting getting a performance review. I think at this point, Google did them quarterly. It was like constantly we'd be doing them. We'd be done with one cycle, we'd start the next one. And I remember sitting there and it was like 7 minutes of wind up and build up until my manager finally told me my rating. And I was so nervous. I was sweating and I was scared. And I don't even remember what the rating was, but I do remember feeling like this feels terrible. So brutal is even if it's a bad rating or you're telling somebody that you're eliminating their role, which is such hard news to deliver that news within the first 90 seconds of that meeting. Tear off the Band-Aid. Ouch. Move on. And you can do it with empathy. You can do it with thoughtfulness. And that's not just like sharing a feedback rating. It's also just day-to-day feedback. So AJ, if we got off this podcast and I were like, well, I didn't think this was great. You weren't a great communicator. You'd be like scratching your head. Like, what does she mean? And how is she defining communicator? But if I'm brutal and I say, you talked 30% of the time, and I would expect a podcast host to talk 10% of the time. Like that's concrete. That's brutal, but that's concrete. And that's something you can work with.
It is so true. And oftentimes we try to, compliment sandwich it, speak in superlatives, and we don't add any concrete examples or ways that person receiving the feedback can truly improve. And we're doing them a disservice because so many of these situations, everyone's looking for growth. I mean, if you're listening to this, if you're reading this book, which we encourage everyone to do, you're looking for growth and you need those moments, those gut check moments where you get the brutal feedback. And sometimes you got to be the one to deliver the brutal feedback to get the team back on track, to get back to that goal.
I have a quick framework for this. It's called SAFE. How do you stay safe as a manager when you're giving feedback? So SAFE is setting, action, feeling, and effect. So setting in this podcast, let's just stick with this ridiculous hypothetical example. In the podcast, let's say I'm sharing this with you 2 weeks down the line. In the podcast that we did together, AJ. So that's the setting, right? Like not, hey, you are a poor communicator. Setting is like, this is the specific situation where it happened, the client meeting, the phone call, the actual podcast, right? The action is, I felt that you spoke about 30% of the time when I was expecting you to speak about 10% of the time. That is a specific action that you took. Then I check in with you and I say, and this part is so key. And this is the differentiator of how to give like brutal but thoughtful feedback. F is feeling. So AJ, how are you feeling? What was going on for you during that podcast? And you might then say, oh, well, gosh, I felt like, because of the fires in LA, I didn't have as much time to prepare as I would have normally. And so I wasn't quite buttoned up enough. And I kind of found myself like rambling, like whatever it was. That's an important one to check in with the person, say, how are you feeling? And then you might give really good context. And then you close with E, and that's effect. And if I were the manager and I were in charge of evaluating you on your podcast performance, then I might say something like, and this is kind of a big deal and it could impact your quarterly rating. Or I might say, oh, AJ, you are a rock star and you're always so on your game. And I know this was just a little blip. This is really kind of below the fold feedback, not above the fold feedback, meaning like if on a newspaper, top line headline versus like a tiny little footnote at the bottom. And so then you walk away knowing exactly when it was, what happened. You have an opportunity to share how you are feeling, and you know if this is a big deal or a small deal with SAFE, SAFE, setting, action, feeling, and effect.
I know in going through these traits, there are going to be some members of our audience who are feeling like they're in an environment where they can't express any of these traits. They've allowed these bars to not only close themselves in, but sometimes it's the environment that creates this. And we get this question a lot of when to leave. You feel like you're doing everything you can, but you don't really feel great in this job market currently around leaving. So I know that you have a great framework for really diagnosing when it might be time for you to leave, the FLIP framework that I think would be super helpful for our audience.
As much as I hate to drop two acronyms back to back on all of you listening, I'm going to drop two acronyms back to back on all of you listening. All right. So how do you know when it's time to leave? FLIP, FLIP, fun, learning, impact, and personal. Are you having fun in your job, or are you rolling your eyes in every team meeting thinking, oh, tried that 6 quarters ago. That's never going to work. I is for impact. And that's your business impact. Because if your business impact isn't there, it's not going to bode well for you or your career. If you're moving the business, you're moving your career. So that's, I did this out of order. That is I for impact. Let's sneak that L in there. That's for learning. And this is step function learning, not just incremental learning, because most people have some level of incremental learning every day, especially depending on your industry. But like with AI, everyone has incremental learning every day. But you want step function learning. You want a couple emails in your inbox that give you butterflies in your stomach because you don't quite know the right answer yet. You want to feel like you're on a project and you feel like you're out of your comfort zone, and then you finish that project and you're like, oh my gosh, that kicked my butt, but now I'm such a better, technical person or communicator or relationship builder because you've like just been put to the test on skills that you didn't feel like you had previously. So that's F for fun, L for learning, I for impact. And then P is personal life. What's going on in your personal life? Because that's valid too. Let's say that you just found out you were pregnant and you want to just kind of stay where you are for the moment because you've got a lot of other stuff that are going to be, a lot of other things that'll be changing in your life. Or maybe you want to move across the country with your partner or to another country and it makes sense to, change roles because of that. So what's happening in your personal life is a valid reason to stay or go. And by the way, the other thing that underpins all of this is your manager. Your manager can make or break your happiness at work. It's kind of like, Sex in the City. He's just not that into you. If your manager is just not that into you, like peace out pronto, because it's not going to get better. They're not going to all of a sudden become a super fan. And if your manager isn't an advocate, your career is going to stall real fast.
Going back to what we shared earlier, that invisibility starts subtly and all of a sudden it snowballs to a place where you're not getting any chance for visibility for promotion.
Yeah, definitely.
This was such a fun conversation, Jenny. Thank you so much for stopping by. Where can our audience find out more about the book? And I know you have some great tools and resources to share as well.
So they can go to itsjennywood.com/book to purchase it. Well, you can purchase it anywhere books are sold. And I have a newsletter that comes out weekly with like under a 2-minute career tip, how to thrive professionally and go after what you want, and covers everything from negotiations to relationship building to succinct email writing and all sorts of real practical stuff to build relationships with your boss, with your peers, with everybody. And that's itsjennywood.com/newsletter. I'm also on all the socials and I post every day on LinkedIn, so you can find me there too.
Great. Thank you so much for swinging by.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Such a joy to be here and have this conversation. Thank you.